Hey people, thanks to the overloaders who are waiting for us to go live. I always see you in the chat and I do try and let you know, but I do appreciate you for turning up on time. This is the Seattle Overload podcast where we're going to look at Super Bowl takeaways. What can the Seahawks learn from that Super Bowl Kansas City victory, their consecutive victory? We're going to look also at Mike Macdonald's second radio interview, some interesting things said by the head coach, find out what Griff thought about it too. And then, wow, what a setup.
And my dog, apparently. Brady, do you need to go outside, bro? What's going on?
Brady is very agitated, heated about this one.
Chad, if you're watching this, he just jumped on me. This is a great preamble topic. Brady, you got to go outside of my room if you're going to act like this, bro. Do you want to go out? I'm Matty. You're going to go solo for a second.
That's fine. Oh,
let him outside.
Brady is pumped about the third and final topic, which is Geno Smith, and obviously there's a significant date coming up, February 16th. We're going to talk about why that's significant. And we're going to talk about where we're at with Geno Smith. I also wrote an article about it, which those of you have probably seen, SeahawksOnTape.com, talking about Geno Smith. So we've got a loaded podcast today. Now, chat, good to see familiar names. I'd also really like to thank Lee La Riviere for a very kind donation, which we've received via our Stripe link. Those of you who are here, please do like the video, comment afterwards, do all that kind of stuff. It does help us grow. We are growing right now, so that's good. Interest in the team at a high, and it's good to see so many people getting involved. Tell a friend, etc., etc. Griff, do you have a preamble topic, or should we just dive into it?
Yeah, I've got a preamble topic.
Oh,
Have you heard of the Younger Dryas?
the younger what?
The Younger Dryas.
Dryas.
Yeah.
Is that like an ancient thing?
Yeah.
An old thing?
I'm watching another archaeology video.
Oh, right.
It was only 1,000-year period. But
Okay.
of how humans endured it and stuff. I don't have any more info for you than that, other than it was.
But what happened during it?
12,000 years ago. Well, I probably shouldn't have led with this topic because actually I don't know. That's what I'm about to find out when I finish watching that video later.
Update: Griff is learning about the younger. Was it Dryas?
Dryas, Dryas.
Dryas. Okay.
If you must know, for my source, the Younger Dryas was the last stage of the Pleistocene epoch that spanned from. All right, this is not what the YouTube video said. 2.58 million years ago to 11,700 years ago. I thought it was 1,000-year period. You know what? Scrap this. Scrap this topic because I don't know enough about it yet. Maybe next time.
Hey, you ambitious?
Yeah. Anyway, how are you? How's the weather?
The weather's fine, thank you.
Great. I love that.
Yeah,
I love that for you.
You do? Thanks, man.
Because you're not an extreme weather guy, right? You like it mild and temperate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Not too hot, not too cold. Goldilocks.
Exactly. Same. I mean, we're on a very similar, latitude on the planet. So we experience similar weather patterns, don't we? Cloudy.
Yeah, I think that's how it works. You're
rainy,
just
drizzle.
Yeah, you just got a bit more elevation and things like that.
True. Yeah. Well, what is the highest point in the British Isles?
Ben Nevis.
Ben Nevis.
Yeah, don't laugh.
Mountain in Scotland.
Don't laugh. You're going to see the height and you're going to be like, it's tiny. Hey, that's the best we could do, okay?
Hey, no, that's valid. 4,400. I mean, you guys are a tiny island. It's not like there's a lot of room for, there to be a big mountain on it. You know what I mean?
Can you imagine?
Yeah, I mean, you'd be all mountain because like the base of those things, they're like I like what's the diameter of the base of Everest has to be bigger than the British Isles, right?
No,
I would think.
no, really?
What is
No.
the diameter of Mount?
That's insane. I know it's tall and big, but that's insane.
I can't get diameter. How long? Because you type in any distance with Everest, they want to tell you the
The height.
elevation, right?
Yeah.
So height centric. Guys, size doesn't matter. Height doesn't matter. Why are they so
Right. It's what you do with the
right?
height.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say.
Ah.
Anyway, I can't find this out.
Okay, great.
I'm prepared.
So find out next week whether Ben Nevis's diameter is larger than the whole of British Isles.
Well, no, Mount Everest. We know Ben Nevis isn't.
Oh, sorry. I misspoke. Metal Dragon saying sports key to NFL Draft Simulator is free, unlimited, and just as good as Pro Football Focus's. Metal Dragon, very good information, thank you. Misfit saying I watch BritBox every night for what it's worth. Thanks.
You feel related to?
Yeah, we're so,
I mean, it was like we hit it off the second I mentioned Peaky Blinders. You were like, oh, he understands everything about my culture now.
That is me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should watch that sometime.
Pretty
right,
good.
should we do this thing?
Hit it, Matty.
Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast, where it's time for us to, well, get kind of off-season-y. Mike Macdonald's done his second press conference of the season. Very exciting things talked about. The Seahawks have announced some staff hires. There's a decision to be made around last season's starting quarterback Geno Smith. We'll kind of give our viewpoint on that, our opinion on that as well. But first, a big game happened on Sunday. I believe they call it the Super Bowl. And the Kansas City Chiefs won their second one in a row, hoisting the Lombardi Trophy for a consecutive season, beating the San Francisco 49ers 25-22 in an overtime thriller. The best Super Bowl since, objectively, possibly that one which we don't talk about anymore. Although that was kind of ruined by injury. But the level of play was very high. But I mean, watching the tape back of this, Griff, I was like, this is nuts. This is just... And even watching live, I was lucky enough to watch it in very good company, expert company. The only thing which would have been better in terms of the company I was watching it with, would have been watching it with you, Griff. But watching it live as well, I was pumped. At every call, I was just losing my damn mind. I was like, oh my God, this is nuts. Yeah, how do you feel about that game?
It was very kind, Matty. I echo the sentiment. Yeah, it was a good game. Like it was a defensive showout from both teams. Mahomes is inevitable. Now, it was a very winnable game. The 49ers could have won it at multiple points. But so could the Chiefs. The Chiefs could have blown it open a little bit too. That one big play to set up scoring position for the Chiefs, that huge, what was it, throwback post route?
Yeah, where they seem to be having issues just locating the ball in the lights of that stadium or something. But the safety, if he'd got underneath that and kept going, he'd have picked that off. But he just seemed to lose, completely misjudge what type of ball was thrown there and just completely break downhill.
Right. I mean, it was a total arm punt is what it should have been. But yeah, so that was something. That was a game. That was a not momentum changing, but that was a game changing play. Who knows what happens? And then of course the fumbles down in the red zone. Those things definitely stood out. But man, dude, Patrick Mahomes, he's not going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, he can't. He's just unstoppable, really. I mean, the Chiefs were the weakest they've ever been on offense. And Mahomes just pulls it out of the hat in
Yeah.
structure, out of structure.
I mean, to that point, Neil Payne, who has a Neil's Substack, he shared this stat. Since 2001, there have been 125 drives in the NFL postseason, where it was at least the fourth quarter, there was under a minute left to play, and the team on offense trailed by 7 points or fewer at the start. Out of those 125 drives, only 40% of them saw the team on offense go and get the points they needed. Some quarterbacks were pretty good at it, such as Tom Brady, who was 5 of 11, so 46%, or Drew Brees, who was 3 for 6, 50%. But only Patrick Mahomes is 7 for 7, or 100% in those really kind of tough clutch moment spots where it's do or die. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of that dude.
Yeah.
Now, enjoyable game, great game, high-level football on both sides of the ball, kind of interesting scheme clashes, not exactly the same kind of thing going against each other, just really, really fun stuff. But from a Seattle perspective, there's perhaps things we can learn from this, maybe in their direction going up against particularly their divisional opponent in the 49ers. There's some takeaways. So, Griff, Brock Purdy, is this the formula for doing Purdy in?
It was so the whole thing is pressure from 4 down looks is what tends to break his mind combined with man coverage. I don't know. I haven't looked into why like he does well against like a 5-man rush out of a bear front or an odd front, but then a 5-man. Well, I mean, you can probably pick it apart because you know who the rushers could be out of a bear front more easily if 5 are coming. Whereas if 5 are coming or 6 out of a 4 down front, that 5th guy is going to be one of the second level players. Maybe it's easier to disguise. Maybe he has problems figuring out the protection pre-snap. But then the other thing, the big thing with man coverage is that the reason why you play man against Brock is it feels a little counterintuitive because the 49ers receivers, independent of the quarterback, are very good against man coverage. Like, you play man coverage only if you feel like your guys are better than their guys. Now, granted, the Chiefs have good DBs, right? So did the Browns when they played them. But most defenses would still rather not live in man coverage, cover one man against those guys. So, like, why would you play man against them? And I think, I tweeted this. Brock Purdy makes really good anticipatory throws, but they're very much predetermined, where he doesn't really have to think too much, and he knows exactly what coverage he's going to get. And he has supreme trust in the receivers and Kyle knowing he's going to scheme it up. It's almost like a trust throw. And granted, to his credit, he will put it often, not always, but he'll put it at a high rate where it needs to go. He'll throw with anticipation, and just sure enough, Ayuk, Kittle, Debo just run into the window every time. They just fall into the ball. And now, granted, those windows are often pretty big too because of how Kyle's scheming. But I think that part of the reason why he's so good at it is that, and it's so repped, like real NFL reps, is that he can use the zone defenders as kind of reference points for when to really let go of the ball. And like they're kind of like visual, like training wheels, like they're like guardrails, the defenders themselves. When you go into man coverage, there are no defenders in the middle of the field, like, unless you've got like a rat or a robber, right? But if you can identify where that guy is, you're trying to place where to throw it. And he threw a lot of those balls leading the defender, like on those horizontal balls, like way out in front. I think he put a couple behind him. It's like he's not as accurate. Like the on target rate, the catchable rate dips against man, and I think that this is further hammered home because in one-on-one situations where it's like a go up and get it, the 49ers receivers have extremely like high catch rates, and he's putting it well enough to where they can get it. But that's more like vertical one-on-one situations. When it's time to make timing throws against man coverage, horizontal breaking stuff, he doesn't have the frame of reference of the zone defenders around to make that throw. So I really think, the formula might be sending 5 and 6 out of an even front, 4-man front, and playing cover one. Now, you have to have the guys to at least stay with them, right? The receiver core. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Matty?
Well, I'm trying not to sneeze right now. Hold on. I think I'm good. Yeah, Trent McDuffy obviously helps, right? Like he had an absolutely astonishing game, and they seemed really in tune to how to like he was playing real good press and undercutting like dig routes from press man, which again there's some anticipation going on there. All their kind of in cut stuff was very impressive, and then not only was it a lot of man, it's kind of the right blend of disguise to make it work. It was quite funny seeing. I mean, it's not like Seattle hasn't tried to play man and pressure in the past against the 49ers. They just didn't have the dudes, or they didn't have the right disguise. It's also not like Seattle hasn't tried to play a lot of 4-3. It looks like a 6-2, like reduced over fronts, like Spags did, right? But Spags did it with the right amount of disguise, but he also did it with 6 DBs on the field, or even 5 DBs, it depends. But, he did some kind of, got lighter, more cover guys out on the field and said, yeah, we can hold up against the run with how we're disguising, confusing the center point, etc., etc. Now, when I say hold up against the run, the 49ers, yeah, they did have the fumble, which tanks their EPA per play, but their success rate on early downs was still 80th percentile. So they were doing, the success rate in early down rushing was 87th percentile. Their success rate on all downs was 80th percentile. But to me, it just came off as like, this is all kind of stuff Seattle's done, just with much better disguise and layering. And then the man coverage thing, I see PFF has it charted as 64.3% of the snaps as man, which is significantly higher than they'd faced in the season, other than against the Browns in week 6 when they faced 71%. But also the cover 0 percentage was really high, the highest of the season, 21.4%. Now, some of that man, I think, I don't want to, I haven't gone through and charted like this company have. Some of it may have been some fire zones going on and like pressure coverage, right, which is technically a zone. But they did play a lot of man, and I think, Griff, to your point, it does kind of deny those kind of in-breaking windows that they'd lived in for most of the season. And when the few times that the Chiefs did play cover or zone, they got carved up in the same way. That big dig route that we spoke about, I think off air, but like the cheesy dig route they hit early on, like the deep play action, like in cut, where they're so good at running it and the details of that. But I think what these games showed is, okay, when you say they've run that much cover 0, well, you'd think, okay, or even cover 1, okay, let's throw it to McCaffrey. Like, why can't we he's the outlet, he's the unguardable guy, and a lot of the times when teams try it, he gets matched up on the back and he beats him. But Spags just seemed to have, particularly on the high leverage downs, just the right answer for the protection, which kind of exposed Shanahan's cover 0 game plan of like, often the center's the guy responsible, as Nate Tice pointed out on Twitter, often the center's the guy responsible for setting protections, and that kind of obviously the quarterback's aware of where they're pointed the mic out to, but I think because the guy throwing the football isn't the one setting the protection, then throwing hot there's some different challenges to that, and Spags had the right kind of variety for it. Don't get me wrong, he got beat on cover 0 a few times, but when it like they gave up a touchdown running it, but he just had enough stuff and ultimately won the day. So also what it shows from a Seattle perspective, all the disguise stuff which we spoke about, all good. Now I believe they won't be running much 4-3 over like reduced, like the 6-2 look, like big looks. They'll be more in like an odd front stuff, more like under and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But in base, like for heavy 21 personnel stuff. But what it does show is the real importance of having big 4-3 type DNs. Like if you don't have a guy who's 270-ish, like a George Karloftis or like whoever their weak edge is, when I should know that, but a guy who can play the 5 technique and have a guy outside of him, or a guy who can play a 6 technique head up on the tight end and then be comfortable coming down a bit further to the 3 tech side.
It's often Chris Jones too, right?
Right, good point. Yeah, who's obviously a big dude, right? Then you're done. And Seattle last year, they didn't have that. So when it came to, okay, we don't really have the edge talent to be just playing super wide, like the 49ers do, by the way. They just jet their front like nutters. Yeah. Even then, though, they do skinny down occasionally. But if you don't have those types of players, then you're done in. You can't play successful run defense. And so Kansas City, there was elements to that game where I was like, they're going to run all over, especially at the start of the game before the fumble. But they just had the right blend, and you can question some of Shanahan's calls in the moments. But I think also Spags just had an absolutely fantastic game of just enough layers, enough calls. That cover 0, 3rd and 4 play where cover 1, 3rd and 4 play where he gets the center thinking the pressure's coming from the opposite side and gets a rush to clean up the B, and Shanny's on the sideline going, go to Christian. Well, Christian's still doing the first part of his route while the free rush is coming to Purdy. Purdy's looking right at the free rusher, not even at Christian McCaffrey, which again points to maybe some structural issues that Spags was able to kind of expose. Also, if you're going to run a lot of cover 0, a lot of pressure stuff, that generally, on that play, McCaffrey got motioned out into the slot and they put Kittle in the backfield to try and get him out in the pattern, but that generally keeps the back in, right? So, it was just the exact right blend of the calls, and they've got some really intriguing talent, and they do a bit of everything. But yeah, the man coverage thing to me as well is just the way. Well, doing cover 0 stuff, that kind of cuts the field in half, right? But it also gives you, with all the motion stuff that happens, if you're just sat in say they're motioning into trips or jet motioning into trips, it kind of gives you the extra guide to where the motion, it gives you the right numbers to where the motion's happening, and the pressure kind of gives you the time just to play off on it, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of almost cuts the field in half.
It does.
And it cuts the field in half to the way that you're kind of playing for, Mm-hmm. And I don't know how often this is a team that is looking to throw backside or the backside concept when they're pressured, right?
Right.
So I think there's a lot of things which go into that. I need to look more into it, because just as a nerd for football, it was good. Right. But I'd say there's definitely with how they pressure, and obviously McDonald in his opening presser, he credited Jim Johnson as one of his influences, who obviously Steve Spagnuolo learned a lot from. He was excited about Spags' game plan, and I think there's similarities.
Yeah, you imagine that he'll study that game intently, and while McDonald and Spags there's a common ancestor if you go back far enough with them in terms of influence, but they're different enough though. But there is still some overlap. But with McDonald's defense, there's enough of he spends enough time in each kind of broad category that if he wanted to for a game plan, he could spend a whole man coverage focused game plan, a cover 0 game plan if he wanted, if he thought that's what from tape study would attack the 49ers. Of course, we don't know if they're going to stick with Brock Purdy next year. We don't know what Kyle wants to do. Brock Purdy had great numbers last year, albeit not for a full season, and was recruiting Tom Brady. So we don't know how he views this. We don't know how he views Brock Purdy's NFC Championship game, where he threw some picks or threw some near picks, and same with the Packers game, right? He really didn't have that great of a playoff. He really didn't. So we don't know how Shanny feels about that either.
Well, Shanahan right now is kind of, the whole 49ers team is in their fields, which understandable.
Yeah.
When
he lost the Super Bowl.
When you come close again, and you had the health this time, and understand very much what it takes to be that good and try and get there. But Shanny has fired defensive coordinator Steve Wilks. That's after Nick Bosa on the Tuesday said, the zone read got us a couple of times. We could have been more prepared there. We have to know in crucial situations who is going to have the ball, and obviously it's Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, Steve Wilks gone. Apparently, a big reason for that in Shanahan's eyes, his reason for doing that was he felt the marrying of the pass rush to the coverage was a big reason for that, and the kind of inability to do that. I know it's not just based on this game, and I just thought the defense did pretty well. It's just Mahomes did his thing, and maybe there was a few times where you could be like, hey, a pass rush game here would have been nice rather than just rushing upfield. Maybe we could exploit protections a bit more without needing to, with a 4-man rush, But I think this had been rumbling throughout the season. Like, it's kind of weird what was going on with Wilkes. The fact that they
Yeah.
gave up 17 points. The offense put up 17 points in 3 straight games. And that ended up with Wilkes basically. Didn't he have to move from the booth to the sideline? And there was all this rumbling about how the defense wasn't doing well.
Yeah.
While the offense was struggling.
It's a little weird. I mean, granted, the second half of the season, the 49ers defense did not play well. They regressed pretty hard.
You know, they were the 32nd team in run defense EPA per play versus zone runs.
Interesting. Wow. So, yeah, I mean, to that point, I mean, who knows where along the chain of events does Shanahan identify like this is where it needs to change? But on its face, it does feel a little scapegoaty, especially to fire someone that quickly after Super Bowl.
It might just be that the D-line just has hated him from the jump, and Shanahan's just like, okay.
Could be that. I mean, yeah, there's always the case of these things not even necessarily being like square performance reviews and more so interpersonal relationships breaking down, things you can't see. And like you said, like the entire team's in their feelings. Yeah, they lost the Super Bowl, but there might be strife in that locker room, you know, and that could be a variable. Again, it's so funny that like they're one of the most vocal teams in terms of, I don't want to say whining, but like stating their piece about whatever the case is. Last year with the Eagles, you know, throughout this year, and it's such a strong juxtaposition to how they play on the field. Granted, I mean, if you know the run defense is bad, do you call a team like that hard nosed? But I mean, I don't know. Their skill position players are extremely tough. Like on the field, like extraordinarily tough.
Well, and their linebackers absolutely violent, and it sucked that I couldn't believe the way Dre Greenlaw got injured. I cannot believe that. And one of the touchdowns is them busting fast 3 because the backup linebacker, whose name I don't know, which not being disrespectful, but there's a reason I don't know his name, is because it's not Dre Greenlaw. He busts a fast 3 rule with his down safety when they get like a red zone like seam route. And that's a touchdown, you know? Like, think about what difference that would have made holding them to a field goal. It all kind of adds up. That they had health up to that point, but that is obviously an unfortunate aspect to the game, which happens. But yeah, they're violent across the board. But there's they could do with winning one because it's gonna get interesting otherwise. Fascinating to watch that all play out.
Yeah.
But encouraging signs again for the Seahawks looking at this, there's a Brock Purdy thing we can look at, and then their defense, the Chiefs really did struggle. There's a lot of similarities to how the 49ers play defense still to how the Seahawks did it back in the day. Like, they're running soft sky. Like,
straight
what the
up.
hell? But Kansas City just did the classic, like 3 to a side, 4 to a side, move the pocket a bit, really stretch the hook and stress the hook. Just Fred Warner's incredible, and their pass rush is really, really good.
He does not melt past the hash ever, the field hash. Only when he's breaking on the ball does he. Like, it's almost like just a coached landmark at this point. With wider splits, like when Bobby was like amazing, he would still melt past the strong hash often. It wasn't until like the reduced splits thing where you start to see linebackers, kind of the good ones anyway, stay on the hash and know they need to stay on the hash because of where that dig route hits and where the windows are, and only expand when the quarterback takes you there.
Yeah, the significance of not melting past the hash being to be in tune to the dig route, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, it's just a good like starting point, because then you melt accordingly. It's like the midpoint almost of where you should be.
His right, good point. Yeah, his ability to process so much with just his peripheral scan of the two, like his primary threat, right? But then get back to the quarterback and understand what he's getting, and if he's getting an in cut behind him or. Unreal player.
Yeah.
But not a Super Bowl champion yet. Okay.
Rough.
So, please do like the video. It's now time for the Seahawks news. Starting off with the Seahawks.com website made it official. The Seahawks have named 7 coaches to their 2024 coaching staff. We've spoke about some of these, but first off, Griff, an apology. I pronounced defensive coordinator's name incorrectly on our show where we spoke about him.
As did I.
But the first name, you Americans are butchering as well. Did you know that?
Oh, really? It's not Aiden?
It's not Aiden.
Oh, wow.
It's Aden Durde.
Aden. Wow, that took me by surprise.
Yeah. So, Aden Durde. So, he's officially the defensive coordinator. Mike Macdonald's obviously the head coach. Ryan Grubb, offensive coordinator, which we reacted to live in our past show. Thank you so much for the views on that. Jay Harbaugh, the special teams coordinator. Leslie Frazier, the assistant head coach. Scott Huff, the offensive line coach. Kirk Oliver-Doty, the inside linebackers coach. And then Carl Scott, defensive passing game coordinator / defensive backs coach. So Scott keeping his title as passing game coordinator there. Griff, where do you want to take that one?
Yes, all the names got official. The only surprise is besides Aden Durde's name being pronounced as Aden Durde or Dirty. Shoot, it's Dirty or Durde? Dirty. All right. So we're talking dirty. Okay. The only surprise, I guess, is Carl Scott retaining. Well, one, that because it was initially reported that he was being retained, but in a senior defensive position. Like, what does that actually mean, right? So then when I saw DB coach on the press report, I was like, okay, cool. Like, he was probably going to be coaching DBs, but I didn't know if he just have some like floaty like title, like we don't really know what he does. So coaching DBs, but then that he actually maintained his passing game coordinator title, basically keeping his job last year. I think that's cool for him. As far as like how much, if his role is actually identical, because that can mean anything. That can mean you're the third down game plan. It could mean that you actually have a lot of say over how to institute coverages and how to coach them. So it can mean anything, right? It is interesting because I thought that with McDonald being the de facto DC, I assumed Dirty would be like the run game coordinator, or maybe like the guy who would have a dedicated role in attacking protections week to week and stuff. And then therefore Frazier would be the de facto passing game coordinator or the passing game coordinator in name as well. And so clearly they give it to Scott with, McDonald on the route, with McDonald being the head coach and Frazier being on the staff. I thought that was a pretty good sign that they think highly of him. And granted, he has the background with Nick Saban, Mike Zimmer, Pete Carroll. And he has background in history with the players as well. That's really good for continuity. Clearly, McDonald was pretty impressed with him. If they did an interview, maybe John Schneider put in a good word and thought highly of him being the only guy to be retained. So, Matty, what did you think about all of that?
Yeah, I mean, Scott Huff, pretty important to bring him on board. Obviously, with Grubb coming into the NFL, never being in the NFL, maybe he'd have got an NFL offensive line coach, but it makes sense that he's got the guy he worked with at Washington. I know Huff was there since 2017, obviously. Grubb wasn't there that long, was he? But, they've clearly got a partnership going. I don't know how... I have to watch it, but I don't know how translatable like the techniques are from like the Husky stuff to NFL stuff. Again, it kind of says to me how ambitious the idea of Grubb is, along with Huff. Like, it's going to be super, super interesting.
Right.
There's more and more overlap, I think, between the two phases. But John Schneider spoke about in the past how college offensive linemen come out and they need to be retrained completely. Whether that was a few years ago, whether he still feels the same, and what his opinion is on how Huff's going to have to coach in the NFL compared to what he did in college, that would be super interesting to hear him talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's great that he was able to bring Huff along with him, him just being a good O-line coach. But, the more staff continuity, the better. Trying to have a guy that you've worked with before, the fact that he was able to steal him away from the board is pretty encouraging. or pretty cool because you'd think the board would want to hang on to as many assistants as possible.
Yeah, and the system familiarity, right? Like, because
Right.
Jamarcus Shepard, I think, is, he was the receivers coach, obviously, at Washington. He's sticking around in Alabama as their co-offensive coordinator.
Right. Right. And, there's only so much a coach can do when it comes to like the talent that you have. He might have influence on acquisition and stuff as well as Grubb. But, and I thought highly of Andy Dickerson, but if there's one room, if there's one position group that could benefit from a potentially like O-line master, if you will, or master at the position, it would be the offensive line, right? Because that's the unit of the team talent wise. Or I don't know if that's true, but it's the position that performance wise could stand to improve the most, right? And that position improving would change the fortune of the team the most, right? So yeah, that is all pretty that's all pretty exciting. And just I mean, I don't know. Does Oluwalewitimi turn into an all-pro? Would he have turned into one anyway? Who knows? But it's exciting stuff. So I'm happy that was able to happen.
There you go. Right, so we'll talk a bit more about Seattle's 2023 offensive line in a second, but before that, Mike Macdonald went on the radio, as he does, as he's obliged to, I think, as a Seahawks head coach. But it was his first appearance with Brock and Salk, his second appearance on Seattle radio after he was on with Bump and Stacy after his opening press conference. So he's had a few weeks to settle into Seattle. He's obviously hired a coaching staff. Griff, he spoke about some of the hires he'd made, spoke about Frazier, Dirty, spoke about Grubb as well. What stood out to you about that interview?
He didn't really give a whole lot of substance. I think he kind of made a mention. I mean, of course, how can you that though, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're speaking of generalities.
They're not football people.
Yeah. Well, and
No,
he even
joking,
said like he even said himself, like I know it might sound like coach speak when he was talking about the offense. That's where my mind goes to the most is the offense. And granted, like it is coach speak, but there are some things you can extract from that. It was a pretty safe answer. He's not going to tip his hand, but he emphasized a lot the run game and play action, right? But then I thought it was interesting that when he said, like, if you want to just get into drop back offense, he framed it as when it's time to drop back. And what he means by that is like when a team passes more or runs more or passes less or runs less, it's the pure drop back pass attempts where you're not using play action that comprises those fluctuations, right? And so when he said when it's time to drop back, it definitely sounded like on its face as though like, I mean, similar to Pete Carroll in that you and how he's talked about the game, you build it up only insofar as your team can merit calling that much. Because if you don't have, it's not just spamming play calls, right? You have to know how it's coached, how to run against different coverages, how much half field you want to do, where it's simplified for the quarterback and the protection. You have to consider that the realities are limited by what you can protect for, and stuff like that. Now he can say all these things, and then they could go pass the ball 60% of the time, right? It doesn't really matter. And granted, Grubb comes from an offense where he has thrown a lot. So, and then obviously McDonald knows that. But just the messaging is very much like it all starts at the run game. But then I think, Pete Carroll pretty much verbatim has said the same thing. And he says the same thing every year. And then his pass rate is different every year, just about like like what he says and what he does on the field don't necessarily align, which means the words themselves aren't indicative of anything concrete. They're just more themes. And like Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Bruce Arians, they all say the same thing and when asked about these questions. So I don't know. I didn't really get a whole lot from it other than that detail about him emphasizing like when it's time to drop back, like it's not just something you can just do. I don't know. What did you think, Matty?
Yeah, again, I don't know how many coaches sound similar across the league, but there's obviously similarities with what he said just in these various, not that many media appearances in his time as Seahawks head coach compared to Carroll, right? They obviously have some slightly different views on like defensive scheme, but I think it's encouraging that everything he's saying is there's nothing which is jarring or like wow. And on the kind of offense stuff, he again mentioned how he mentioned adaptability when it came to Grubb, which is not the first time he's mentioned adapting to the players, but he mentioned that as a positive. He mentioned how you can't chuck the ball around in the NFL and win games, and that a great example of that in recent years, where my mind went to, was 2020 Seattle, where they really did try to do that, and you saw the diminishing returns that fast. And obviously, we've spoke about Russell Wilson's part in that and his skill set, but I think just generally it's not a winning formula. Exactly the same sort of things that Pete Carroll said as well. I mean, it's all kind of common sense that he said. I'm trying to find... Yeah, the run game is the core identity, is the big standout, right? And he said about how Grubb's system was reflective, even though it looks like they're chucking it all over the yard, it was reflective of the roster they had in Washington and really accentuating the guys they had and the talents that they had. And again, he mentioned his adaptability and flexibility. But then he was tellingly talking about how Ryan is an offensive line guy at heart, which once more, we need to go back and look at their time pre-Washington because... I
did watch a little bit of Fresno State 2021, and there is way more use of the intermediate in general than also more of the middle of the field, of which there wasn't very much at UW. So my concerns about Jackson Smith and Jigma are quelled a little bit. It's very obvious how you'd use him. That said, I still think that there needs to be a little bit more intentional, like conflicting interior zone defenders, but then you don't really see the zone spacing in college that you necessarily see in the NFL. So, I mean, either way, it's going to be a necessary adaptation, but I have no doubt that you can figure that out. We just don't know what it will look like yet.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's just all going to be built around the players, which again, isn't a common sense, obvious thing, but that should feel obvious. And if it doesn't, then I think, you might see a coordinator change. Like that's clearly going to be the emphasis. Yeah, he mentioned their efficiency running the football as well in Washington, despite, throwing the ball a lot. And then in terms of his offensive identity, I found it interesting how he said how they want to be really good at core philosophies, core fundamentals, core concepts on offense. And then they want to be able to apply them on a game-to-game basis based on who they're playing, but without reinventing their offense every week. So that physicality is one of the core identities. But, that could be they've got a multiple run game where they're physical from that, but their run game concepts, the way that they're taught, and he likened the offensive approach to the same as defense, right? Build it through the same lens as we've built the defense. If you look at some of his clinics, which he did for the Coach Gaylor Crushing Cancer Clinic, which you should check out, he speaks about his almost modular system of like they can get into so many different calls, but for the certain players only need to learn certain things, and the calls are like there's basically 4 words, and a slightly different word will change a call for them in a way, and he likened it to a slot machine where there's say 4 different symbols on a slot machine wheel, but there's 4 wheels, so then you get that much variety. There's so many different possibilities, right? And it sounds I think that's the same way he's going to do it with the kind of. That's how he gets defensively multiple, but keeping it simple and players on the same page. That's how a lot of people do it, by the way, but he clearly has the right formula.
Yeah, I do like how
the offense going to be like that.
Yeah. No, I do like how he said emphasize core concepts, and it's a no-brainer thing, but he's pretty much saying like we're going to have things that we do just because we do them. And that doesn't mean that they won't have built-in answers to defenses that change. Like the adaptations are going to be on the margins so that those core concepts have life no matter who you play. Which again isn't novel. It's not reinventing the wheel, but I liked he didn't come out and say like, we're going to adapt every week. We're going to be different. We're going to be multiple. Like he's not hyping it up. He's like, to me, I was like, we're going to play football and we're going to be good at it. And then he said like, yeah, we're going to have ideas. We're going to spice it up a little bit. I like the emphasis on like, you got to play sound foot. Like that's what it comes down to me watching the Ravens defense. And he said he wants the offense to mirror the team and the offense and defense to kind of be on beating the same drum. But they're going to be like a well-coached team. They're going to execute well what they're good at. That was the main theme I got from it.
Yeah, and I know you've somewhat defended Shane Waldron, and his offense did perform better than I think some people give credit for. It's easy to go and attack a play caller, right? But the frustrating thing with him at times is it felt like they didn't have a core like set of plays. They seemed so random and sporadic with the kind of siloed nature of that, and their kind of bread and butter play, like their staple play, at times it like you didn't know what it was, which wasn't great. It was kind of scary. Yeah. And then that's where you get into the kind of very loose terms of lacking an identity and all that stuff, which, maybe that does mean not scoring enough touchdowns, right? But, yeah. Anyway, right. So the other thing is he spoke more about the chasing edges thing. So that was when he mentioned having a growth mindset and how he attributed that to Grubb. He talked about how they're trying to push the envelope about what they're trying to do and how he wants that in people. He doesn't want a mindset where people are like, hey, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way to do it. And we're stuck on that. And he said how he wants the chasing edges thing through all aspects of the program. And they need people in the program to have that same mentality. He picked up the chasing edges thing from John Harbaugh in Baltimore, but that was more to do with the scheme of it. This is basically resonated with him further of like how he wants to build his program, which again, it's just having the mentality where they're trying to push the envelope, trying to win on the margins, find the winning edge basically. So, yeah. It will matter if they start winning. If they start winning, then chasing edges will become more and more of a thing, just like Always Compete did. It's his way of doing it. It seems like he's still fleshing that kind of idea out in his mind, though, just hearing him speak about it and how it kind of, he didn't come up in his introductory press conference, but then the radio interview where he's had, 40 minutes in an intro presser, he comes back in, do a radio interview for the first time, and it just comes up out of the blue. Like, it's clearly and I don't think he's as enthusiastic yet, at least a culture guy in public as Pete Carroll was, right? But yeah,
he'll be his own brand. We'll see it take shape, and he'll evolve. He's 36 years old. He'll grow and shape and learn on the job, right?
Yeah. So you didn't. He also spoke about Leslie Frazier, mentioned how he has so much experience, basically, and he's going to lean on what he knows football-wise and his character. And being a first-time head coach, mentioned how Frazier's been through the wars and can see around the corners. So, again, kind of what we said, but good to hear it. And then on Dirty, he said, listening to him talk about how he sees the game was very similar to how I saw it in terms of what you need to do to be able to defend offenses these days. He had some really interesting perspectives, which, that podcast I mentioned, which I will tweet out. I should have the name right now, but I don't. It's a rugby podcast, and I can't remember it, but just hearing Dirty talk, the way he talks about a lot of things, there's real crossover with what McDonald said. And this was recorded back in, I think it came out last October, but I think it was recorded in the Dallas Cowboys preseason at least. So, yeah, very interesting. Good fit. Now, Griff, as we kind of cycle, anything else on that? Anything else on the interview?
No.
Okay. Well, let's cycle then into our final topic, because McDonald hasn't really, like, obviously he said how Geno Smith's at the Pro Bowl, right? But he hasn't really spoken in the... He hasn't spoken much about Geno Smith specifically. He's kind of just kept it in broad terms when talking about quarterbacks. And ultimately, Griff, that may not be his decision, because obviously General Manager John Schneider is now the president of football operations, which was a big part of the Pete Carroll firing. And Seattle has somewhat of a decision to make on Geno Smith. So Geno, 33, turning 34 this October. His cap number, which was $10.1 million last year, leaps up to $31.2 million. That takes Geno from being the 127th highest cap number in the league to the 20th highest in the NFL. Seattle also has an out in Geno Smith's contract. It was reported basically as a 1 year / kind of 3 year deal almost, because a pre-June 1st trade of Geno Smith would see the Seahawks incur a $17.4 million dead cap hit, but also save $13.8 million while also clearing his 2025 final year of his contract. But they must execute that, I believe, before the 5th day of the 2024 waiver period, which is February 16th, because Geno's 2024 salary becomes guaranteed on that day, which, of course, we're recording this Wednesday night. That day is this Friday, this coming Friday. So, Griff, maybe they restructure him, maybe they trade him. Now, I should better understand this. If they trade Geno before June 1st, even if it's after this Friday, are they on the books for the... It doesn't matter, does it? Like, because although his salary becomes guaranteed, that's the other team on the books for it, right?
Right. Yeah. There's no chance they cut him. I don't think that there's any. It doesn't make any sense to. If you're trying to get out of the money, I mean, you're signaling what you're doing in the draft pretty heavily. I think the only interesting thing is, like you said, do they trade, or do they? Or do they attempt a or do they attempt a like restructure or something, or extension? Yeah, as we approach the draft, that's when it will get more interesting. I don't expect anything to happen yet, though. So yeah, I mean, beyond that, I don't know what there is to say.
Well, and the people in the chat are saying about how March the 18th is the important date in terms of if they were going to trade him. Is that to do with something like injury-related guarantees?
Oh, that would be a good point.
But anyway, well, what more there is to say is, Griff, the argument will be that Geno declined in every single metric, like basic numbers-wise, regular season games played, completions and attempts, passing yards, passing touchdowns, passing interceptions, passing touchdown to interception ratio. Well, his interception ratio is actually the same, but anyway, and quarterback rating from 2022 to 2023. So, and thank you, chat, for pointing out it's his roster bonus that hits on the 18th, which is a $10-ish million roster bonus. So they have a few more days potentially if they were going to trade him. Anyway, Griff, he's declined, right, in the basic numbers. And we did hear rumblings that maybe that the contract he signed at the time wasn't as attractive because, you know, he's not a star signal caller in terms of shifting jersey sales. Hasn't placed in the NFL merchandise top 50 sales, whereas, you know, Russell Wilson did even when he was bad, and so did Mac Jones even when he was bad. So why, Griff, would they not move on?
You know, what they will do and what we think they should do are not always in alignment. Of course, that is that is our inalienable rights as sports fans, is to criticize what the team does and defend accordingly. It's so I think that, yeah, the raw numbers in the aggregate are worse than last year. And there are so many lenses you can look at this through. But I believe that he is not only not regressed, but intrinsically better than 2022. And the reason why I think that is, if you look at his performance the first 13 weeks of the season of 2022, that's when the O-line was, by composite ranking, and just the eye test and the tape and everything, anywhere between like the 12th and 18th best O-line, like smack dab in the median, right? Cluster with a bunch of teams, which is to say it's good enough that if you have a good quarterback and good receivers, you can take advantage of it. And they were like the 6th or 7th ranked offense over that period. And then you look at the final 5-6 games of the season of 2022, the O-line regresses massively, but nowhere near as bad as it was this year, but still regresses probably to like some arbitrary cutoff, 22nd, 23rd maybe. And his efficiency nosedives, and it brings his overall efficiency down. So my general thing is that the O-line this year, and even before like he really turns on the Jets, before that Ravens game this year, the O-line before the Ravens game, or even after, including the Ravens game, was even worse than that regression period in 2022. And his stats still blow out of the water over that period, that regression period in 2022. So like the first half of 2023 are still better in the aggregate than 2022. And it's like comparing apples to apples, even not so, even more so, to the point that I'm making. The O-line is even worse in that period and his stats are improved. So relative to the supporting cast, I mean, his stats were then better. So that means like he found a way to manage that. And then if you break up those stats, his early down stats in that period are literally elite. And then third downs, they're terrible. But if you look at the final 5-6 games of 2022, his early down stats are about average, and the third downs are terrible. So he's able to improve at least one of those buckets. I mean, he's adapted, if you will, to still be elite on early downs, even as the O-line around him is crumbling. And then if you look at the second half of 2023, when you get Abe Lucas in there, but then like it's really not that much better. There's still a carousel at right guard. They're kind of cycling Lucas in and out, and then he misses the final 2 games of the season anyway. The second half of 2023 in Geno's games, the early down efficiency, elite early down efficiency, sustains, and then the third downs improve to about 10th by both EPA and success rate, so conversion rate. So I mean, I see intrinsic regression across the board by accounting for context and comparing apples to apples. And also just the second half of the season, his stats are 6th. He's like right behind. He's right behind like Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love, Josh Allen, and I think one other name that I'm forgetting. I'm not saying he's better than everyone ranked below him, but like he played absolutely better than, I don't know. He was no worse than the 7th or 8th quarterback the second half of the season. Probably about 6th makes sense. For the whole season, I think he's top 10. And again, like there's a lot of different lenses you can look at this, like his stats under pressure, like points earned per play, which is Sports Info Solutions' version of QBR. And I use that only because we can divvy it up by down. But his first down points earned per play ranking for the whole season is like first. And then his points earned per play on second down is like third. And his pressure rate on those downs are like 22nd, 24th, and like 38, 37%, which is extremely high. But it's actually not extreme. It's very high, not extremely high. That's kind of the point. His protection on early downs is bad, but regular bad, just run of the mill bad. And he can still give you elite output in those situations. Elite output. That's not an exaggeration. Third downs, the protection goes from regular bad to deplorable. And then the numbers also tank, and that speaks to Geno not being an elite improviser, right? That speaks to like his arm talent. When he gets off platform, tanks, whereas when he's on platform, it's very high end. But it speaks to his style, and it makes sense. But then he still even found a way, just speeding up his process the second half of the season. So, I mean, I think he's a top 10 quarterback. He's a top 10 quarterback at 30 million, not 40, not 45 million. I think that's a very good quarterback situation to have. The only reason why if if he hit the market right now and he was 25, 26 with the exact same past 2 years, he would be looking at 45 million per year. Just that's the way quarterback markets work. So in my view, if he stays healthy, like, they're in a very lucky situation, and it's only because he's 33. And that's the only reason. If he can avoid injury, then, the Seahawks are in a very good situation. That's just my take. Matty, I know you got a bunch of numbers too. Where do you want to take it?
Well, you've been pretty comprehensive there in terms of the numbers. Yeah, I mean, more of the context is that the receiver play really struggled. I think, when you don't score touchdowns, it's easy to look at the play caller, but there's certain Waldron things where it's like, why are we always trying to get beyond the sticks? And like, can we not have a play where it's like a shallow route? Can we not do a bit more of that on like third and longs or in the red zone? Why are we always throwing beyond the sticks? I thought his red zone play calling concepts were, we said at times when we were looking at the film, kind of yucky, right? It's like, how many times can you run double posts or that like stupid hitch, seam, stick route, but not a stick route? Like, are we going to bend the seam route? Like, and then bringing it back to the receiver play, like, the details are awful. There were so many miscommunications. They weren't on the same page. Pete Carroll came out and said they weren't giving them the right routes, basically. And just like a complete mess. The thing I'm fascinated about when it comes to Geno is why in the first 9 weeks of the season was he so bad on plays where he was not pressured? Like, why did that happen? And how do you... And those facts I've just spoke about, obviously, part of that, right? But how do we prevent games like the Bengals game happening? Now, every player has a bad game, but that was a particularly poor game from him where, bad mistake and then just like terrible red zone offense. I believe the pass protection looked pretty bad there as well, but I'm talking plays when not pressured. He was poor on in the first 9 weeks. And obviously you have, the Ravens game sprinkled in there where they had a really tough game. The whole offense, but again, that seemed more like a kind of no one open thing. Anyway, I need to go back and look at that, but ultimately it's, if you look at all the context and why I like total points is it seems to better fit like an individual player compared to EPA per play. It's like the context of it. Yeah, the offensive line was abysmal. Like, in my opinion, there's no reason Geno, with all he's learned, with the chemistry he has with his receivers now, with what I've said, right? But they have an understanding and a connection if they're not sloppy the details. The second year, Jackson Smith and Jigba, like, if you just give him, like, this year, offensive line combined, Pro Football Focus, SIS, ESPN, and their metrics, they're 29th in the league. Last year, they're 21st, but obviously regressed up front. Imagine if the offensive line was 15th. Like, we saw what Geno could do, and the other factor to this, and the poor non-pressured plays performance in the first 9 weeks is, even if you're not pressured on those plays, all the pressure you've been under before that does impact the non-pressured downs because you have less faith in your pocket. Your play caller has less faith in what's possible, all of that stuff too. Yeah, right. If you gave him like a 15th O-line, as evidenced by the last 7 games of the season which he played in, where, on the non-pressured stuff, he was really, 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 really good. Like top 10 easily. Third down as well. But
I mean, I think if you can get to the 15th, 16th ranked line, sorry to cut you off, Matty, but if you can get there with the receivers and where Geno is at right now with his processing and accuracy and just the ability to manage a pass-first offense, we should be talking about a top 5 offense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And a Geno Smith who, well, he's definitely in the top 10 of quarterbacks, but I think top 5 is within his reach. And so this is where you get into the discussion of, okay, if he's not top 5 quarterback, well, why are we paying a top 10 QB, right? Well, it would be nice to have Patrick Mahomes. It really would. But if you look at the quarterbacks beyond like the dynamic ability of like a Lamar Jackson, who, by the way, like if you look at some of his struggles, there's limitations there. Like every quarterback has, right? But there has been limitations there. There isn't that much difference between the 10th quarterback and the 5th quarterback, right, in the top 10 rankings, if like week to week, right?
Right. I mean, there are honestly between like quarterbacks 6 through 14 are all liable to outplay one another any given week. Like 14 could outplay quarterback 6 for a stretch. Like there is some interchangeability there. To your point, so
yeah. So, Bryce, good to see you, man. Bryce saying copium. So a quarterback who isn't in that rankings, I'd say, is Jared Goff. Griff.
Yeah.
Well,
we're preaching to the choir there. That's not exactly that won't get a rise out of them.
No, well, it might, because the Lions are going to pay him, right?
No, the Lions should rally around Jared Goff and play good football. They should double his salary.
I mean, look where he got them, Griff. He's rebuilt that franchise.
Yeah, Dan Campbell would be nothing without Jared Goff.
And imagine what he can do with Ben Johnson again.
It makes you wonder, is Amon-Ra St. Brown a Jared Goff merchant?
I had been wondering that.
Yeah. Anyway.
So, Football on Mushrooms, great name. How is that? How is Football on Mushrooms? Anyway, I think there's a good argument to draft an interior lineman at 16 and fortify that line. Yeah, I mean, you can get into positional value stuff, and I haven't looked into the draft too much, but if they just had a really reliable right guard, like an absolute great right guard, they would really do things for the offense.
Right, and that makes you wonder about 16 and taking the Husky tackle guard swing guy.
Yeah.
But we'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there in time.
Yeah, so just to really kind of ram home the point about pressure percentage. Oh, just read the article. Anyway, he had the slightly slower than average time to throw, but like we're talking 0.5 a second. No, 0.05 of a second, sorry. And yet... No, I mean 0.5 a second. But yet, he was the 7th most pressured quarterback on third downs, but pressured 51.3% of the time in the last 7 games, which is insanity.
And you mentioned, you wonder about the circularity there. Is it the concepts aren't popping, so he has to hold the ball?
Right, because it's easy to beat up on an O-line. But
right. Or does the pressure hit so quick he has to move off his spot, try to reestablish, which can take time too, adding to it. It's all circular.
Yeah, which is why you need to look at tape, and it's easy to point towards the Cowboys game because it was one of Geno's best games of the season. But like, look what he did in that game, and look how he's able to do it. The pressure is bad, like really bad, and he's having to throw a insane next gen stats charted time to throw time, like insane, and just throw guys open basically in a way that honestly I said it in my video, which I'll just put a link to in the chat, but that is not a sustainable way to play offense for any quarterback or any offense, because when you start doing that, eventually it's going to get picked off, or it'll get tipped, because when you're throwing that quick, there's requiring a real timing element, and it requires quite a few things to go right.
Right.
Bryce, that's copium.
Well, that is a good point, though, and that does make me wonder about Grubb, and because he spams choice, he spams weak side choice and strong side choice, very Bruce Arians of him. But then when it comes to maximizing Jackson Smith and Jigba, where are the dig routes, bro? So we do wonder about that. But there are more digs at Fresno State, but even still, it's, I don't know. It's not hard to scheme up a dig route, but Wicked Garden, your comment about Tannehill for 2.5 years was a top 5 quarterback in terms of his stats. And that was with like rookie AJ Brown. He was very good. But what the Titans got out of Tannehill at $32 million is like a dream. You would kill for that. That's what the Seahawks are looking at. For the same reasons that you've said no, I say yes. I understand where you're coming from, but like $30 million for potentially accessing a top 5 offense, which is within Seattle's grasps, is extremely worth it at $30 million. We're not talking 40, 45 million. That's you're talking about being able to access with a legit, realistic chance a top 5 offense with 15 million in savings to go use other positions.
And I think Geno's a quarterback who can access more areas. Well, that's such a bad way of phrasing it. I think you can do more with Geno Smith as your quarterback than you can Tannehill.
Well, in Tannehill, it was you had the benefit of having a lot of runs in the sample, right? So the D-line isn't teeing off. When Geno's in the gun, they know they're passing, and they're just teeing off on him, and Geno's still just getting through his reads and getting the ball out. So,
yeah, it would be a massive shock for the reasons Bryce mentions in the chat and how cheap $30 million is. Like I said, it's the 20th highest cap number in the league, and there's things you can do to work out the cap number, right? But it's still, for the quarterback discussion, it's still only the 12th highest QB number, like reflecting how cheap it is in that sense too. It would be really surprising if they decide to move on. I know McDonald's mentioning Drew Lock, and maybe he wants to kind of give him a fair shot, but I think locker room wise as well, justifying that would be interesting. Yeah, it would be very, very surprising.
Right.
Okay. If you want more on Geno Smith, at CMike Spin Move, just search Geno and all of Griff's stuff with how well he just recited all of that off the top of his head. All of Griff's stuff you'll find on Twitter. Also, SeahawksOnTape.com. Geno Smith is future at quarterback via me. That has a lot of data in it, a lot of it from Sports Info Solutions. And then also, we need to talk about Geno Smith video on this channel, the YouTube channel, where I go into that Cowboys game and how it all worked.
Matty, did you know that butterflies are crustaceans or crustacea?
No, they're not.
Yeah, they are.
No, they're not.
That's insane to me.
That's not true though, is it?
When I hear crustaceans, I just assume sea dwelling.
Well, where does a butterfly come from?
I guess they probably evolved from some crustacean that crawled out of the water at some point.
No, but think about a caterpillar, right?
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Yeah. I got you.
Yeah, a caterpillar feels more like a crustacean, right? Like, if you look at caterpillars as well, the kind of like a lobster and how beautiful a lobster can be, a caterpillar kind of has that color thing. But
I feel like, but I feel like they adapted that for very different reasons.
Oh, well, you feel like, do you know it? Because are we just dealing with feel?
Yeah. I'll walk into a biologist's
I don't believe that you've got that correct. You've been off today. Are you sure they're crustaceans, or are you just messing with me?
I think that they are. Butterflies are crustaceans.
What?
They are. How long ago did that happen?
Based on what?
Based on Wikipedia. What more do you want from me?
I don't... Nowhere on the Wikipedia does it say they're crustaceans.
You're right. Shit.
What are you talking about?
All right, but if you type in "are butterflies,"
oh, if you type it in, are
butterflies crustaceans?
This is a really bad moment for the pod.
Lobsters, bees, and butterflies are all classified in the phylum Arthropoda. Okay, you're right. I'm wrong. Where the hell did I read this? Why did I think this? Wait. Okay, never mind. I'm gonna get to the bottom of why I think this. I think my taxonomy is messed up. I might have committed a false equivalency at one point.
We have a donation, Griff, which is about football. Can we just deal with the
Yeah,
football?
yeah.
Fat says emerges from wilderness, haggard and gaunt. Yeah, hope you get some food. Listening to Macdonald, it doesn't sound like he's mentally, emotionally left Baltimore. How's it, guys? I mean, I think it's natural that he refers to Baltimore so much because that's where he's come from, and he spent so long there. And it's such a big influence on him, obviously. I think he probably has. I think that's just his type of personality. It's obviously such an adjustment personality-wise, but also an adjustment for us where we've been dealing with Pete Carroll, who's been there for so long, and now you've got a new-time head coach. Like I wouldn't surprise me if a lot of new-time head coaches spoke like this. But that's it. I've kind of picked up on it occasionally, but I think it's just completely natural. But I don't think you can read too much into that, Griff.
Yeah, it's his only frame of reference, like you said. Um, he's gonna bring it up a lot, and like once that first practice hits, that first mini camp or the draft, he's got too much he wants to prove. So
the chat is absolutely. I can't believe I tried to back you on. Oh yeah, caterpillar kind of looks like a crustacean in the colors. What on the chat is roasting you, and rightly so.
Yeah. Hey, I acknowledge that I was wrong.
Well, not really. You kind of doubled down and said it says it on Wikipedia. Then you said, "Oh, it says it on the internet." You tripled down and then acknowledged you were wrong.
I was very wrong, chat.
Yeah.
I read that actually first on Twitter. I Googled it, and then I think I was confirming my preconceived
notion. You read it on Twitter?
Yeah. No, I did.
Brilliant. Roger, Sutherland makes the starting roster, says Roger.
Hell yeah.
Griff, you're a fan of Johnny Sutherland, aren't you?
I think we both are. He can fit the run as a nickel. So
yeah, my concern with McDonald is like, is he speed pilled? Is Sutherland the run fitting nickel? Is he like the Kyle Hamilton, or is he like the dime in the nickel? So the dime being the weak side backer, what McDonald calls that.
Well, Hamilton did not test well. Didn't he run a 4.7?
Yeah, and then everyone was like, "Oh, he's a bad player. He's tall."
Honestly, I think he's fundamental pilled.
Oh,
I think he wants hitters and guys that are fundamentally sound. So
Sutherland is an interesting name. There you go. Bryce, that's right. 4 a.m. is an excuse. Haley, thank you very much. That's kind of you. Right, Griff, anything else? Chat, ask a question and we will answer it. This is your opportunity. Don't mess it up. Sometimes we ask for questions and then you just start arguing with each other, which is always weird. Sookman, what do you think about Julian Love? How will he be utilized? He'll just play safety. Like he'll just play safety.
Yeah, he'll be the weak. Go ahead.
He's okay. All pro vote, Griff.
Yeah. Geez, man, I don't know about that. I mean, he'll be the weak safety. In one high, he'll be spinning down. He might play a little bit in the post, a little bit of one high when they like to do really funky safety spins to disguise the coverage and everything, especially combined with the sim pressures. But he's just going to be playing safety. So
this is a good question. Steps Reek Woolen needs to take in year 3 from Bryce. Griff?
Stop busting your seam read when in cover 3 and quarters.
Learn zone.
Learn
Unfuck
zone.
yourself.
Don't like, play high to low when you're a cloud corner. Don't bust your smash rule. Don't like, you got to be alert for 3 even when 1 and 2.
Actually tackle. Like show a willingness to tackle.
Yeah.
Like don't reach out a half-hearted fingernail.
But when it's time to actually cover guys one-on-one, whether cover 1, cover 3, or quarters, when it's actually one-on-one coverage, his
issue. He's a lot of the time he seems very uncertain of, like, say it's cover 3, say he's on the single receiver side of cover 3, they get like play action of some description. He gets a deep over or a deep race route or even a deep in. He seems very uncertain of whether it's his job to squeeze it late, or whether he needs to hold for like a leak route coming back, if that even exists, or if the post safety is going to nail down or top hat it or drive on it, drop kick it. So yeah, he's a very interesting guy to see. The fact that kept Kyle Scott around, a guy who worked with him last year and saw him regress after a really good rookie season where Scott was still coaching him. Obviously, no more Pete Carroll. Maybe McDonald finds a way to reach him more. But yeah, he's a fascinating guy because there's a lot there, but there's also a lot that he needs to work on, and he regressed a lot. It didn't help, obviously, that he was injured in the off season, and so he missed all the kind of technical and probably like mental, like football scheme learning that needs to happen in that off season to take the next step. Didn't happen, and so then he wasn't even able to kind of avoid regression of certain things, and the problems he had in the first year got even more exposed and leaned on by teams, and then that was that. So, yeah, he needs a lot of steps. He needs to take a lot of steps. So, massive year for him.
Yep. Agreed.
Football on Mushrooms saying, what will the Hawks do to reassemble their linebacker core? They should just re-sign Jordan Brooks, and then they'll probably get put him on Mike and then play like a Patrick Queen type of mirror, like a lighter type, like a dime, playing the weak side spot. So that could be Devin Bush, but they might just move on from him. Just someone who's a bit quicker and faster and more suited to playing a bit more outside and a bit more like on the slot sometimes, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, Bush is interesting because the will, like last year, and again, this kind of speaks to there actually is quite a bit of overlap between the structure of McDonald's defense, Seahawks defense, but you can make the will matter as much or as little as you want to, and that matteringness can be commensurate with that player's ability, basically.
Yeah. Like if you had a Cody Barton, Griff, you could have him wall 2 down all the way down the seam, and have him carry that on in like a cover 2, right?
You certainly could, and he's also a good blitzer, and we know that he likes to blitz the will a lot, and McDonald does. So, but Bush is a skilled blitzer, and I actually like his spot dropping. I think is pretty solid with the full camp with the ones, and with a D line that has good edge play and like just being coached right. I feel like Bush could be starting quality. I would like to see that. I would like to know if McDonald would want to see if he can reclaim anything there. I'm sure that they probably scouted him during free agency last year in Baltimore and were familiar with him being in division with Baltimore, with obviously him being a former Steeler. So I don't know. I mean, I remember like every game that Bush played, which wasn't very much, he would do something every drive where I'm like, hey, he actually kind of has skills. And then every drive where it's like, wait, why did he do that?
Yeah.
And like, I wonder like how much of it is he just needs reps in the system. Can he eliminate some of the negative stuff? But
right. And don't forget, like, it sounds obvious, but he was at Michigan in 2019. There's some kind of weird
Very good point there.
Or sorry, 2016, 2018, drafted 2019. So there's some kind of weird overlap. And yeah, he actually looked like a linebacker at times, which some of the guys do not. And then the other element to all of this is the new inside backers coach, Olive Adotti. Kirk Oliver-Doty, who we don't know what he thinks about guys. He was with the Packers for the last 5 seasons. I don't think they were that well stocked at inside backer, right? But we'll have to see if they have. We're just talking like I said, like a Patrick Queen type of mirror if they re-sign Brooks. But obviously, re-signing Brooks could be difficult, like the Houston Texans. Yeah, there'll be teams interested in him, you'd think.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, chat. Good to see you all. Good overloading. Please do like the video, subscribe to the channel. We'll be back probably tomorrow, but we need to kind of come up with a topic. Griff, have you watched Senior Bowl stuff? Probably not, right?
No, unfortunately.
We'll come up with something. Chat, let us know what you want as well. Subscribe to the channel, follow Griff at See Mike Spin Move, follow me at Matty F Brown if you want to donate, and thank you Fats for your donation tonight. Always appreciate your support. There's also a Stripe link in the comments section. Comment, tell a friend about the pod. It's great to have all this experience. 5011, I've seen that question. Ask it next time. That's a good question. And yeah, we'll be back soon. Hopefully no like dramatic Geno Smith news or anything like that based on this thing. Preston, Mike Macdonald film study. That's a good idea, Preston. That could be something we do almost after the draft, but I guess the interest is at an all-time high. So maybe we do like how Mike Macdonald destroyed the 49ers, except he kind of did, but actually they moved the ball a lot because they're really good. They just turned the ball over and took the ball away. Anyway, I'm rambling. Follow the pod at Seattle Overload to know when my next live should be tomorrow. And if you're listening, give us a 5-star review. Thank you. Griff, say goodbye to people.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Hit it, Matty.